All right, so now that we've done a little bit with some basic um, tweening, we talked about position change, using motion tweens for position, for scale, rotation. There are actually other properties that we can animate. Okay. So you might remember at the beginning of this module, we talked about symbols, and I said you can actually take symbols and apply certain effects like tint or alpha. Well, we can actually animate those properties as well. Okay. So this is exercise 7. I have this character Frankenstein. And Frankenstein is already a symbol. You can see that here, where it says instance of, and then it says Frankenstein. What I'm going to, if I click on this symbol under color effects, there's an option called tint, and I can set that to any color I like. I'm going to set it to red, and I can tint my symbol anywhere from 100%, which is like full tint, to 0, which means no tint. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this is by using a motion tween, we can actually animate this tint over time. So what I want to do is the action is going to be Frankenstein becomes more tinted over time. Okay. In this case, tint is measured from 0 to 100. So the key pose at the beginning is tint is set to 0%. The key pose at the end is tint is set to 100%. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this layer here with Frankenstein in it. I'm going to go make this a motion tween. Okay, so you can see that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on my first pose, let's highlight Frankenstein. And I'm just going to make sure it's set to 0. Okay. Then I'm going to take my time marker over my motion tween. Let me zoom out a smidge. I'm going to highlight the symbol again so that I get access to the property, and I'm going to set this to 100. Okay. So on first pose, it's set to 0. On the second pose, it's set to 100. If I play it back, the character becomes redder over time. Now, in this case, it's, I don't know if I want to set it to 100%, but maybe something like, I don't know, 60% might be good. So you don't obstruct the whole character. Okay. You might remember, so this, once again, this ghost here is a symbol. You can tell that here. And if you might remember, we had something called alpha. Alpha is kind of like opacity in programs like Photoshop or Illustrator, where it's how opaque your object is. When an object is opaque, you cannot see through it. Okay, so like a wall is 100% opaque. A piece of glass is like 20% opaque. It's not invisible, so it's not 0. Usually because there's like some shine on it and there's some, dirt sometimes, which lets you see more or less of it. But, it'd be like a lower. So right now my ghost you can't see through, but if I set it to alpha 0, that's kind of like 100% transparent, or it's invisible. If you set it to 50%, you can see that the character is kind of semi-transparent here. Once again, we can animate these properties using motion tweens. So in this case, the action's going to be ghost fades out from 100% opacity, or alpha, I should say, to 0% alpha. Okay. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to take, first of all, this needs to be a motion tween. Okay, which I have right there. I have my character here. And I'm going to highlight the symbol. We're going to make sure it's set to 100%. I'm going to move my time marker to make sure it's above my motion tween. Remember, if you want to make it longer or shorter, you can just pull the edges of that. Click on it again, and I'm going to set the alpha to 0. By doing that, my character opacity or alpha is lowering over time. It starts at 100 and then it gets to like, 90, 80, 70, 60, blah, 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 all the way to 0. Okay. We would call this in motion graphics a fade out. If you want to fade in, it would be the opposite. That's where you go from an alpha of 0 to an alpha of like 100%. So what I'm going to do is go back, highlight my symbol. Let's change that to 0. And then let's go over here, click on it again. It's kind of hard when it's invisible, but you have to just kind of click. And then let's raise this up. And so now it's going to go from 0 to 100. And so it's going to fade in. Okay. Once again, we can kind of use this in conjunction with other properties. So maybe while the ghost is fading in, I also want it to move. So the position of my ghost is here on the left. At the end pose, let's move it to the right side of the stage. This is my motion line here, my motion path. And so not only is it raising up, it's also, in terms of alpha, it's also moving across my page. All right, so this here in exercise 9, this is a motion path, okay? And the character, which is this little airplane, is moving from the bottom left to the upper right, okay? And what I want to do is I'm going to take this, and let's say here's my character, and I want it to rotate kind of clockwise and kind of end up over here, okay? So I'm going to take this here, and then now when I play this back, you'll notice that actually, instead of going clockwise, it actually went counterclockwise. Now, why did it do that? Well, because the distance of going from here to here is bigger than going from here rotating this way, okay? And typically what will happen is Adobe Animate, when you rotate, will go the shortest distance, okay? Now, in this case, I don't want it to do that. I want it to do a clockwise rotation. I might even want it to rotate multiple times. So I'm going to teach you guys another way to do this. Don't worry about what I'm doing. We'll talk about this in a later video. So instead of highlighting the symbol like we did with the alpha or the tint, I'm actually going to highlight the motion path itself. Okay. Oops, I guess I did. Let me do that back. I got to have something. Okay, there's the motion path. And what I'm going to do is when you highlight the motion path itself, you actually get a different set of options. Okay. One of them is called rotate. And if you click on it, you can actually say if you're rotating whether you want something to rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. Okay. I want it to rotate clockwise. Then you can say you have this count and you have this angle option. The count is how many full rotations. Okay. Your rotation is 360 degrees. So if you have a circle, this is 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. Okay, so one count is basically equivalent of going one full rotation. Which would be that. You can also just go a certain degrees. So right now, this is a count of 1. So watch the tip of my airplane. It's going to go around 1 rotation. Okay. I could set this to an angle of 180. That means it's going to go 180 degrees, which is a half rotation. So if it starts here, it should rotate to there, which is a half turn. Think about it like in terms of skateboards or whatever. So it does a half rotation. Let's say I wanted to do more than 1 rotation. Maybe I wanted to do 2 or 3 rotations, set the count number. So I'm going to set this to 3. That's going to mean in between here and here, it's going to do 3 full rotations. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. Obviously, the more rotations, it may have to spin faster because it has to go a bigger distance. Now, what if I wanted it so that, at the moment, it's just going to go the entire length of your motion tween, okay? What if I didn't want it to go the whole way? What if I wanted it to stop rotating here? The problem is that your count is from the beginning to the end of your motion tween, okay? So you can't stop in the middle, but there is a way to do like a multiple rotation. We're just gonna have to use a slightly different method. Okay, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna open up a special panel called the transform, and you can set your rotation here. So right now you can see this is set to 30 degrees. This is 30 degrees. That's set here. What I'm gonna do is go about halfway, and I'm gonna do 1 full rotation. So 1 full rotation would be 360 degrees. 360 plus the existing 30 would be 390. Okay, that should be a full rotation. If you want to do more than 1 rotation, just do out the math. So, oops. 2 full rotations would be 720. 720 plus the original 30 degrees would be 750. So what this means is from here to here, it's going to go 1, 2, 30 degrees. So 360, 720, 750, or 2 1/4, 2 1/8 rotations. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about is creating what's called a classic tween. So in the previous ones, we get this motion tween, and the reason for that is so that we can actually have multiple keyframes, and we'll talk about that in a second. Before we actually had that, we had something that was like this. So the way it would work is I have a keyframe here, okay? I'm going to go to frame 20. And I'm going to insert a keyframe. The reason why I'm inserting a keyframe is to copy the previous keyframe. This has to be done with a symbol. In this case, this symbol is the dog symbol here that is in this particular project. And I'm going to create a keyframe. Okay, so there's the first keyframe, and then there's the second keyframe. What I'm going to do is, now that I have 2 on the second keyframe, I'm going to take this and move it to the right side. Okay, I have the first keyframe and then the second keyframe. I'm going to click here, and we're going to go to insert. We're going to go to classic tween. That's going to give me this purple line here with with an arrow, and then now this moves across. So the difference here is it's a similar concept where you can change things like position, rotation, scale. You can also do things like alpha and opacity, and tint and things like that. You just can't do multiple keyframes, which we'll talk about in a second. So I'm actually going to go back here. Let's take this item. And I'm going to scale this. So not only have I changed the position, I've also changed the scale. I could also rotate it. So not only is this changing position, scale, and it's also doing rotation. And if I want to, I could click on the properties, color effects, and play around with something like alpha. So I'm changing the alpha of this. Okay. So I want you guys to try that out. This is some advanced, keyframe, using motion tweens to do some, tinting, playing around with alpha, also playing around with advanced rotation, and using classic tweens, which you may feel more comfortable with that. There are some instances where it might be more useful to use a classic tween than a motion tween. And, as we do more of this, you'll sort of figure out when is the right time. Okay. So I want you guys to try that out.